Awesome. So the secret of Socrates. Now, this is like the one thing that separated Socrates from like literally every other person on the planet, and it's why he was like so impactful and was able to, connect with people at such an intimate, deep level because he fundamentally understood this one concept, and it's if you're wrong, admit it empathetically and quickly because you always want to beat the other person to the punch, because the other person, it's like this idea of like if you get in trouble, right, and they're trying to figure out how they're going to punish the person who did the crime, right? Well, if they like go in and they admit, hey, look, this was my bad, I plead guilty, blah blah blah, like they're going to get a significantly better sentence than they would if they went and lied about it and didn't admit it and it made the other person figure out what's going on. Because it's like this idea of you need to admit if you're wrong quickly and empathetically. And you got to be a wholehearted, like 100%. Like, look, I was wrong, and you know what? That's okay. I'm telling you this. I'm letting you know this is what happened. I was wrong. You want the other person, like you basically want to argue against yourself, because when you argue against yourself and admit your wrongdoing and say, look, I was terrible. This is the worst thing ever. Reason X, reason Y, reason Z. These are all the reasons why it was awful and I should be punished and never forgiven for this. If you become your own like counter argument, all of a sudden you take all the arguments that someone could use against you about why you did the worst thing ever, and you completely disarm them from their repertoire. Like they have nothing to use against you. And now what happens is this person that was originally going to punish you and is originally supposed to be upset with you is now, what are they doing? I'll tell you what they're doing. They're defending you, and they say, hey, don't worry about it. It's not a huge deal. You admitted it. It's okay. Didn't hurt anybody. Versus you lying, versus you defending yourself, versus you getting defensive, versus dishonesty. All of a sudden, when you have that, it absolutely crushes your chances of this happening, because now it's totally up to the other person to point out all the bad things you did. And because you're ignoring them or you're avoiding them or you're not focusing on them, all of a sudden they're going to do all the hating for you. So you want to do the hating for your enemy. You want to beat yourself up for the other person. You want to do like all the arguments that they'd make, you want to make them first. Because the instant that happens, they're on your side. They're defending you. It doesn't matter how bad it is. That's the goal, right? And it increases what? What does it do? Well, it increases transparency, and it makes you look more trustworthy. And increasing transparency inherently will better that relationship and better your ability to fundamentally win this game of friendship, which is so powerful. And it all stems from very, very quickly admitting wrongdoings, being earnest with them, and like empathetically arguing against yourself and saying how awful it was, so that the other person jumps in and does the argument for you for why you should be safe, why you're okay, and why you're good. So that's the secret of Socrates, and that's how he continued to grow and grow and grow. And even if people proved him wrong, he would like admit, "Oh, you're right. I was wrong. I'm sorry. I was wrong." Immediately, right? You don't defend it. You don't get defensive. You have to de-emotionalize your arguments and just put them out in the public light. Put them in the world. Really great way to do this. Try to make more of your mistakes public. The more mistakes you have floating around on the internet, the easier it is for you to now, be honest and quickly admit your wrongdoings. And it's a tough thing to do for sure. But the instant that you're radically transparent with your persona and your perception and your image online, it's so much easier to tell someone the truth face to face when it's like, dude, I don't care. It's all out there. It's not a huge deal. And so you want to get to that point where you care, but not that much. Okay, awesome. Twilight time. So this is a super, super fun episode with Twilight and the CMC. And then, obviously, Diamond Tiara gets involved, and she's got some stuff to say about Twilight Time. So what happens is you got, Sweetie Belle, Apple Bloom, and Scootaloo. And, like, all three of these, they want to learn, so, like, Apple Bloom wants to learn chemistry. She wants to make, like, apple serum. Sweetie Belle wants to learn magic. She wants to be able to, like, float things around and be magic with her horn, obviously. And then Scootaloo wants to be able to like build her scooter, right? And so they all have these skills that they want to acquire. And to acquire these skills, what they decide to do is ridiculously smart. They find, the smartest person that they know, which is Twilight, and they come to her and they say, hey, can you like tutor us on how to do this? Can you mentor us? Can you coach us, right? And so they meet every single week trying to figure out how to do these, nice little simple things to help improve their lives and get new skills, right? Which is super, super cool. And so that's exactly where she goes with it, which is like awesome, right? And so they start doing this for a couple of weeks, and they're having an awesome time. They're learning things, and they're bonding with Twilight, which is awesome. And so for them, it's just an individual drive. They have this urge to learn, and so that's what gets them into it. But then over at school, right, there's tons of kids, and the CMC, they're like traditionally not the most popular people on the planet, and so because of that, they're like eager to increase their popularity, which totally makes sense and is awesome stuff. And so like very early on, you start to see a lot of the kids. They hear that the CMC are working with Twilight, and everyone thinks Twilight's the coolest because like she is the princess and all that crap. And what's interesting is like they have this extremely elevated and just praising image of Twilight in their mind versus the CMC, like they're working with Twilight and they don't think it's like the biggest deal ever, and so they're kind of cool with it and they're just getting it done and just going with it, which is totally awesome because that's kind of what they're focusing on, right? Is actually like what they're learning, not necessarily just like, oh, let's hang out with the princess. But that's exactly what these guys want, right? They just want the popularity of, oh, let's go hang out with the princess, and like the social status that comes with that. And so Diamond Tiara and Silver Spoon, they approach these two, and these two have been bullying them for like years and years and years, and now all of a sudden they're like best friends because they want to get with the princess, right? And so because of that, they like throw these huge parties for them. They give them a bunch of gifts. Literally, like tons of these classmates are just giving them gifts. Like people like are giving them candy and like hats and like shining their shoes. I mean, it's ridiculous. It's really what happened like with Twilight earlier in season 1, right? This idea that all of her friends are doing special favors for her, not because they like her, not because it's normal, but instead because they have something that they want. And for these three, what people want is just to be able to spend time with the princess. And I mean that it weirds them out, just as it should. It's like, what the heck, man? You haven't like even talked to me in 4 months, and now you're like giving me a present. Oh, why is that? I mean, they see straight through this because it's not genuine, right? It's not like real praise, real gifts, real appreciation. It's none of that, right? It's bogus. And because it's bogus, it does not work. And so these guys see right through it. And here's like the most ridiculous part. It's like halfway through the episode, the Diamond Tiara and Silver Spoon, they take the CMC to like their home, which is ridiculous because like they've been bullying them for years. And then they get like a swimming pool, and they have like a pool party with them, and they lock everybody else, like all the other kids get locked out of the pool party, and it's only those two, and they're supposed to be like super special because nobody else is at this party except for the CMC. And so they're like giving them ridiculously special treatment and making them feel totally uncomfortable in this new situation because all of a sudden they're getting like stupidly like just unnatural treatment because they are not used to be like this is not normal, right? And so because of all this praise and all these feelings of significance, like they get their way, right? And so what they do is they bring like 40 kids over to their tutoring session with Twilight. Which is just like insane. And as they get here, like there's just this mayhem, right? Like everyone comes in and they're all freaking out, and everyone's like, oh my gosh, the CMC are the coolest people ever. And they're getting tons and tons and tons of ego and significance from this event. But as this goes on, Twilight's like pretty, because like she's doing this, right, so that she can teach things, right? And when these kids come in, like the kids don't want to learn anything. They're just there to hang out with Twilight and look cool, right? It's like a social thing. And so when they see this opportunity, it's not about learning. It's not about education. It's not about what the core fundamentals were supposed to be built around for this opportunity, right? And so because of that, it does not work. Twilight sees right through it. And she says, you guys are not here to learn. It's bogus. And so what's she going to do? Well, she basically says that the CMC, if they're going to bring all their friends and they want to learn so much, then they should be able to show off what they've learned in front of all the friends, right? And so she gives them their things they've been working on with their magic, with their chemistry, building things, whatever. And they say, well, let's show you our skills. And then they go through the process of making like a potion and trying to float things and building things. And they make progress, right? Like they're always like making constant, a little bit of progress, right? But with this constant progress comes like a growth over time, but they're not like at the top yet, right? And so when they get this challenge from Twilight to do whatever they want to do, Scootaloo, like she tries to put a scooter together, but it gets to the end and it just doesn't work. And Apple Bloom, she tries to make a potion to grow an apple, but she drops it on the apple and it just kind of explodes. And Scootaloo, she really, really tries to lift up a broom and she gets it up like midair and then it just falls down. It's just too tough. So they're making progress and they're really trying, but they just can't prove themselves. And so because of that, Twilight gets pissed and basically says everybody has to leave because they're only using this. It's no longer being used as tutoring. It's just some social event for them to get status, for them to get respect from the peers around them. And they all get kicked out. They're all super sad, and like everything's gone. And all of a sudden, all this popularity that they had in the flick of a moment is just destroyed, and they're back to normal, right? Because it always, you're turned back to normal after like stuff that's not supposed to happen. And this, these pool parties, all this stuff, it's all done and they're back to being bullies, which is just ridiculous, right? Because it was all temporary. And what's interesting is like as they're walking out, the CMC, they say, Twilight, we're sorry. We really wanted to learn, and we just wish we could do it. They go back to their core. They go back to being genuine. They go back to being who they really are. And the instant that they do that, Twilight says, you know what? It's okay. I accept it. Not a big deal. Come on back and we'll learn if you guys are serious about learning. And then they get to go back to tutoring every week, which is awesome. And they get to continue this growth curve and make it to that next level of achievement, which is going to help them throughout all aspects of their life, which is just so powerful. And it all stems from their ability to come back to their core, be genuine, and stop doing it for the wrong reasons and continue doing it for the right reasons. They had the right foundation. They just made a little bit of a mistake along the way. And now they're here, they're back, and they're ready to do it the right way so that they can have the growth that they desire, which is super cool. Okay, it ain't easy being breezies. Okay, so there's this like migration that happens. It's kind of like the dragon migration, but it's for these little like butterfly things, and they're called breezies. And so let's make the breezies green. So like there's these little like teeny insects, and they go in home, I guess for the hibernation, or I don't know, whatever, migration, doesn't matter. The wind blows them on, so they fly on top of the wind, and so they need this wind to like push them, or else they can't really fly, because they don't really fly, they just kind of glide, and so the wind is like super important. And I don't know how they're alive because they're a very, very fragile species, but that's okay. And so all the ponies, they want to see this migration because it looks super cool, and so they all, come together and want to like see everything. And so Spike wants to get kind of like a closer look at what's going on. So he finds like a tree and climbs up the tree. And as he gets to the top of the tree, a slight problem happens. He like knocks a twig loose, and the twig sort of whooshes up in the wind with the breezies, and then it kind of like hits one of them, and then there's like a ginormous crash because everybody runs into that guy who got hit by the tree limb. So that kind of sucks. And so basically like 40 of these guys just like fall from the sky and crash, and then they don't really know what to do. So that's sort of how this episode starts, and where a lot of it comes from, which is super, super cool. So Fluttershy, she sees these guys come out, and she's like, oh my gosh, I gotta save them, And so that's, what she does pretty much. She grabs them, and she, instead of like throwing them back in the air, because they can't really get back up there by themselves. Excuse me. So she goes and she takes them to her home. And at her home, shits them all down, gives them food, stuff like that, and make sure that they're all okay. And they're all like awesome, right? They're doing a great job. Not a big deal. But the problem is, they've got to go home with all their other family, right? And so how are they going to do that? Well, Fluttershy thinks the answer is just to help them out, right? And to sort of resuscitate them back to health. So just nurse them. If you give them enough healing, enough attention, enough nursing, they'll be ready to fly soon enough. And so there's this one leader that kind of emerges from the Breezies, and he says, okay, cool, sounds like a plan. And so they go through this process where like all she does every single day is feed these guys, give them care, help them train, give them whatever they ask for. She just gives it to them and lets them have it so that they can do whatever they need to do to get back in the air. This goes on for a while, but the problem is they aren't leaving the nest. They don't want to go back into the real world now that they have like this artificial bubble around them, and they're just being cared for by Fluttershy. And it's like such a huge problem when you get into like this. This is like the idea of people that get addicted to painkillers when they go into the hospital, right? You start to get a taste of like recovery and what it feels like to have attention and special attention and special goods and special treatment and special access to like drugs and food and friendship as people care about you when they're recovering. But then the problem is like they get addicted to that so much that they don't want to go back to reality. They don't want to go back to the real world. And that's a legitimate problem for themselves and for the survival of their species, because they can't just live here for the rest of their life. It's very obvious that is just not a quality option. So because it's not a quality option, they've got to figure out like what the heck they can do to go out there and be fuller, to be who they need to be, and to absolutely crush it in this ecosystem of animals where they're flying home to be with their community, because they're not meant to be living in someone's house. It's just not right for like the expansion of the species, right? And so because of that, Fluttershy calls her friends in and she says, look, I don't know what to freaking do. Like, what do you guys think we should do? Because these guys are not leaving. And the leader is the biggest problem, because the leader doesn't want to leave. And when the leader doesn't have motivation, when the leader doesn't have ambition, when the leader doesn't have vision, when the leader does not do what he knows is right for the rest of the group, you have a legitimate and serious problem of misguidance, miscommunication, and maltrust with the organization and hierarchy of this social group. And for this one, it's a serious problem because he completely crushes their hopes and their dreams of ever coming back home by saying, no, we'll just stay with Fluttershy forever. It's not a big deal. And you cannot do that. So often, people fall for the easy way. Oh, less effort. This is going to be awesome. It's going to be super great. But what do you think happens in 3 months, 4 months, 6 months, 10 months, 15 months, 30 years? When these Breezies are devout a family, erased from the record books of their society, and live in a world completely different than their tended home. The quality of life and the detriment to their mental growth will only expand in the negative. Destroys their future prospects and their future hopes. And so they need to do what so many people need to do, and take a temporary pain for long-term gain. And this right here is exactly what the main six need to help them do. And so what they do is they say, look, guys, this is bogus. You can't be sitting here all day. You can't sit here all day. Like, you have to go and do things, right? You got to go home. And so what they do is they decide, okay, well, why don't we help you out? So they help them. And they get a little breeze going, and then Twilight casts this spell, right? And so the spell turns them into mini breezies. Fluttershy says, look, guys, you gotta go, let's go. And so he convinces the leader, you know what, sounds like a plan, let's get going. And then everybody else goes. And so they lead the pack sort of as breezies, and then they just fly away on the breeze to, their homeland, and they get sort of their final destination and where they actually live, which is super, super cool. So once they get there, they guide everyone inside, because the homeland, it kind of closes. So like there's a natural event that like shuts the gate to their home. And so like they are on a deadline, right? Like they have to get here on time or else they'll be trapped out for the whole season. And so like there's a legitimate deadline for these guys to actually get to their homes and get inside. And so they get there like right before the gate's closing, and then they see to it that, you know, everybody goes inside, and then the gate closes and they say bye forever. And then they're safe inside, you know, their enclosed, you know, habitat, their ecosystem, their home. Now that works. Why does that work? Well, it works because there's a definite goal, which is to get these guys home. It's a definite deadline, you know, it was like the next night at midnight, and there was a definite reach, right? These guys had to get home, and they'd be trapped in Fletcher's house literally for like the next 2 years or something, which is just ridiculous. So that's why it's so important you tackle these problems with speed and necessary haste when they approach and they appear, because all of a sudden, just this slight change that they had and the immediate action they took allowed them to have massive success to get everybody home in place, everyone at home on time, and everybody in where they needed to be at the exact time they needed it, by simply leveraging the power of these fundamental principles with you know, going through the pain of like having to get up, move out, go to a new land, start a new leg of the journey, and embrace a new society, not a new society, like their old society. They just had to freaking get there, right? And they needed to stick with what was already working for themselves and for their families so that everything continued to function at its peak performance and peak state over time, and more importantly, over the next generation of these, you know, animals, right? Like they're gonna breed, and like everything stems from them being in the right place at the right time. The instant that happens, you know, everybody goes home, all these guys are gone, and they need to follow up. They need to follow through. It doesn't matter what happened, it doesn't matter who caused it or what's the problem. They just power through. And the instant that they power through, it is so much easier for them to make it to the end. And everything changes for them because they have the guidance. And because, you know, the main six, they have the courage and the perseverance and the dedication to follow them through all the way to the end. They follow them right until they get to this gate, because they care about their success and they care about their getting home, because it matters to them. There is a interior significance associated with their freedom and their holiness, and that's why they succeed. They succeed because they care, but not that much, because you can't. Because I mean, basically, they just have to force these guys to get home, and that's, you know, exactly what they end up doing, and it works. You know? So they just gotta go, and then they also had like internal inspiration, right? So they had to inspire the leader, and then since they got the leader on board, like everybody else will follow the leader. So just got to take advantage of like social leaders just like that if you need to influence them.